She warned him not to open the briefcase. Seconds later, the hidden trigger proved her instincts right. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was another evening at the Grandview Hotel, a place that catered to the world's richest and most influential. The grand chandelier above the lobby shimmered with opulence, casting golden hues over the polished marble floor. A mix of high-end business people, celebrities, and politicians filled the lounge, their hushed conversations blending with the soft classical music playing in the background. The clink of fine glassware and the murmur of a busy night made the space feel alive with energy. Among them, a woman moved quietly, unnoticed by most. She was Mia, a waitress who had worked at the Grandview for over 2 years. With her calm demeanor, she floated between tables with practiced ease, taking orders and serving drinks, never attracting much attention. But there was something about her, something hidden just beneath the surface that few had ever noticed. Mia's instincts were sharper than anyone realized. Her observations were keen, and she could sense danger from a mile away. This night was different, though. The air felt thick with tension as a man entered the hotel lobby. He was tall, with a sharp jawline and cold, calculating eyes. His name was Victor Hawthorne, and he was a billionaire tech mogul known for his ruthless business tactics and quick decision-making. He wasn't someone Mia typically crossed paths with, but she had heard his name whispered in the hallways. Victor's gaze scanned the room, his expression unreadable, before he approached the bar to order a drink. Mia noticed the briefcase he carried. It wasn't an ordinary briefcase. It was sleek, black, and appeared to be made of high-quality leather. It seemed out of place in the lavish environment of the Grandview, like it carried something important, something hidden. Her intuition flared. There was something about it that didn't sit right. As she approached Victor's table, preparing to take his order, she noticed the way he glanced at the briefcase as if he was guarding it. Her heart skipped a beat. There was danger there. She could feel it in her bones. Mia didn't know what was in that briefcase, but she knew one thing. It wasn't just a regular piece of luggage. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over to him. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I don't mean to intrude, but I strongly advise you not to open that briefcase." Victor looked up at her, eyebrows raised in surprise. His eyes narrowed, sizing her up for a moment. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone dismissive. "It's just a briefcase." Mia took a breath, her eyes locked on his. "I know it may seem harmless, but trust me, you don't want to open it. There's something dangerous about it." Victor chuckled, clearly amused by her warning. "And what? You think I should listen to you? A waitress?" He smirked. "I'm sorry, but I think I'll take my chances." Mia didn't flinch. She stood her ground. "I know it's not my place, but I'm just saying, please be careful." Victor laughed again, clearly uninterested in her concern. Fine. I'll open it, and we'll see what happens." Mia turned away, her stomach in knots, but she could feel her instincts screaming at her. A second later, there was a faint click from the briefcase, a subtle but unmistakable sound. Mia froze. It was the sound of a hidden trigger being activated. Before she could react, a sharp metallic object shot up from the case, narrowly missing Victor's face. He staggered back, eyes wide with disbelief as the briefcase's hidden mechanism triggered an attempted attack. "What the hell?" Victor shouted, his voice filled with panic. Mia rushed forward, grabbing his arm and yanking him back just in time, pulling him to safety behind a nearby pillar. The object, now lodged in the nearby wall, had narrowly avoided him. Victor looked at her, completely stunned. "How did you know?" he gasped, his face pale with shock. Mia glanced at him, her expression unwavering. "I didn't know exactly what was in the briefcase, but I knew something wasn't right. Trust your instincts, Mr. Hawthorne." He was speechless. His earlier arrogance had disappeared, replaced by a mix of awe and confusion. Mia had saved him. And in that moment, he realized that the quiet waitress he had dismissed was far more perceptive and capable than he had ever imagined. Victor stood behind the pillar, his heart still racing, hands trembling as he looked at Mia. He had just narrowly escaped what could have been a fatal mistake, and now he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. His world, so carefully constructed with wealth and power, had just cracked open, and the woman who had saved him, someone he had written off as just another waitress, was now the person he could not stop thinking about. "How did you know?" he asked again, his voice softer this time, full of awe and disbelief. Mia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she scanned the room, her eyes quick and calculating, as if she was already moving on to the next possible danger, her mind still on high alert. "Instincts," she replied finally, her tone calm, almost detached. "I've learned to trust them." Victor's brow furrowed. Instincts. His mind was still trying to wrap around the fact that this woman, this quiet waitress, had just saved his life without so much as a second thought. "You just saved me. How? What?" Mia didn't look at him. Her gaze focused on the briefcase on the floor, now closed and harmless. She didn't want to tell him everything, but she could see that he wasn't going to leave her alone until she did. "I've seen things," she said, her voice low, as if the words themselves held some kind of secret. "I've been trained to spot danger when others don't." Victor took a step forward, his curiosity overtaking his caution. "What kind of training?" She hesitated for a brief moment before answering, her eyes briefly meeting his. "It doesn't matter," she said softly. "What matters is that you're safe now." He didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to react. All he could do was stand there, in complete silence, his mind reeling with what had just happened. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. He was used to being the one who controlled the situation. But this time, it was Mia who had controlled everything. After a few moments, he managed to find his voice. "I owe you my life," he said, the words coming out more sincere than he'd expected. "I don't know how to repay you." Mia shook her head, her expression unreadable. "There's no need for that," she said quietly. "I did what anyone would do." But Victor wasn't convinced. He had dealt with enough people in his life to know that what she had just done was far from normal. She wasn't anyone. There was something different about her, something extraordinary that he couldn't put his finger on. "No," he said firmly, stepping closer to her. "You don't understand. You just saved me from something I didn't even see coming. I need to know more." Mia shifted uneasily, uncomfortable with his sudden intensity. "I told you, I'm just a waitress. Nothing special," she said, her voice still calm, but the edge of hesitation creeping in. "No," Victor insisted. "You're not just a waitress. You're someone with skills, with knowledge I don't understand. I need someone like you." Mia glanced at him, her eyes briefly flickering with uncertainty. "I don't know what you want from me," she said, but there was a hesitation in her voice, a flicker of doubt. "I'm not looking for anything from you," Victor said, his voice lowering with a sudden seriousness that caught her off guard. "But I do need your help. You've seen things. You've been trained. And I need someone with your abilities." Mia was silent for a long moment, the weight of his words settling in. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine respect that had replaced his earlier arrogance. This was different. But that didn't mean she could just jump into his world, a world of wealth, power, and danger she had deliberately stayed away from for so long. "I don't belong in your world," she said finally, her voice quiet, almost apologetic. "I'm fine where I am." Victor was about to respond when suddenly, the loud ring of a phone cut through the air. Mia's eyes immediately narrowed, her body tense, as she reached for her own phone. She didn't need to check the caller ID. She already knew who it was. "I need to take this," she said quickly, turning away from Victor before he could protest. The moment she stepped away, Victor watched her, his mind still racing, trying to piece together the puzzle that was Mia. Who was she really? And why was she so reluctant to be involved with him? He wasn't used to people refusing him, especially not someone like her. He had to find out more. As Mia answered the phone, her expression hardened, and Victor couldn't hear her conversation, but he could see the way she responded to whoever was on the other end. She wasn't just a waitress. She was someone with a past she clearly didn't want to revisit. Victor knew then that he couldn't let her slip away. Not now, not after everything she had just done. When Mia hung up the phone, she turned back to him, her eyes still guarded. "I have to go," she said, her tone final. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." Victor stepped forward, his voice firm. "I'm not giving up that easily." Mia paused, her gaze flickering to the floor for a brief moment before she met his eyes once more. "I don't need your help," she said again. But this time there was an edge to her voice, a hint of something deeper beneath the surface. Victor wasn't deterred. I think you do. He smiled slightly, a spark of determination in his eyes. And I think I can help you too. She hesitated, looking at him for a long moment before she turned and walked away. But this time, she didn't disappear into the crowd. Instead, she paused at the door, glancing back one last time. Don't follow me, she said softly. This isn't your fight. But Victor wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Victor couldn't shake the image of Mia from his mind. After their brief encounter, his thoughts kept circling back to her calm demeanor, her quiet strength, and the way she had reacted when danger was right in front of them. He'd never met anyone like her before. She wasn't just a waitress. She was something far more complex, someone who had been through things he couldn't even begin to understand. He wanted to know more. He had to know more. Over the next few days, Victor found himself in a whirlwind of meetings, deadlines, and endless phone calls. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on work, his thoughts kept drifting back to the quiet woman with the sharp instincts. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing there, warning him about the briefcase, pulling him out of harm's way. It didn't make sense. He was the billionaire. He was the one who should have seen the danger coming. But she had. She had saved him. And now, he couldn't get her out of his head. Late one afternoon, as he sat in his office overlooking the city, Victor made a decision. He had to find Mia. He had to talk to her, to understand what made her tick, and to thank her properly. It wasn't just gratitude. It was more than that. He couldn't let her slip away without at least trying to make sense of the strange connection he felt. The next day, he went to the Grandview Hotel. He had no idea if she'd still be working, but he had to try. The moment he stepped into the lobby, he felt a sense of familiarity, as if he was stepping into her world. The place was just as luxurious as he remembered, but this time, it felt different. He wasn't here for a business deal or to impress anyone. He was here for Mia. He made his way to the bar, scanning the room, but there was no sign of her. A small pang of disappointment hit him. Maybe she wasn't working today. Maybe she was gone. But just as he was about to leave, he saw her. Mia was standing by the window, her back to him, her eyes scanning the crowd as if she was watching for something or someone. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say, but then he walked toward her. Mia, he said, his voice firm but gentle. She turned, her eyes widening for a brief moment before she quickly masked her surprise. Mr. Hawthorne, she replied, her voice calm, but there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. I didn't expect to see you here. Victor smiled slightly. I know. I wasn't sure if I'd find you, but I needed to talk to you. Mia raised an eyebrow, her expression guarded. Talk to me? About what? About the other night, he said, his tone serious. I want to thank you. You saved my life. Mia's gaze softened, but she didn't say anything right away. She simply nodded, as if acknowledging his gratitude, but it was clear she wasn't interested in discussing it further. You don't need to thank me, she said quietly. It's just what anyone would do. Victor wasn't convinced. It wasn't just what anyone would do. You acted. On instinct, Mia. You saved me when I didn't even see the danger. She sighed, her shoulders tensing slightly. I told you, it's just something I do. I trust my instincts. He stepped closer, trying to get her to understand. But what if your instincts could help me? Mia looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. Help you? How? You saw something that I didn't, Victor said, his voice steady. I'm used to being in control, but you. He paused, trying to find the right words. You saw something in me that I couldn't see. You saved my life, and now I want to return the favor. I want to help you. Mia was silent for a moment, studying him carefully. She had heard this before, people offering help because they thought they owed her something. But there was something different about Victor. Something genuine, something she couldn't quite ignore. You don't owe me anything, she said, her voice low. But I don't need your help. Victor didn't give up. I think you do. He smiled slightly, a hint of determination in his eyes. You don't know it yet, but I think you're exactly the person I need. Mia met his gaze, a flicker of something passing between them. She didn't know what it was, but she could feel it. The same pull that had been there the other night when she had pulled him away from danger. I don't need anything from you, she said quietly, but there was a softness in her voice now, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. Victor took another step forward, his voice lower now. You're wrong. You've been helping people your whole life without expecting anything in return. Maybe it's time someone helped you. For the first time since they had met, Mia seemed to hesitate. She looked at him, her expression uncertain. She didn't know why, but something about him made her want to listen, made her want to let him in. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor smiled, his gaze steady. "I want to help you find out who you really are. You've been hiding for too long, Mia. It's time to stop running." She took a deep breath, looking away for a moment, as if contemplating his words. "I'm not running," she said quietly, but the weight of her words told. A different story. Victor watched her, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know you're not. But sometimes, when you've been hiding for so long, it takes someone else to help you see that it's okay to stop." Mia was silent, her thoughts racing. Could she trust him? Could she really let someone into her world, into the hidden parts of her life that she had kept locked away for so long? She didn't know, but for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could. "I don't know what you're offering, Victor," she said softly. "But I'm listening." Victor nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "That's all I need." And for the first time in a long time, Mia felt the weight of the walls she had built around herself begin to crack, just a little. She didn't know where this would lead, but something told her that maybe, just maybe, Victor Hawthorne was the one person who could help her face the truth. Victor's office, located on the top floor of his sprawling skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan, was a place where decisions were made, where lives were changed with the swipe of a pen or the click of a button. But today, as he sat at his desk, papers scattered around him and the city skyline stretched out behind him, his mind was far from business. His thoughts were on Mia. He couldn't help but wonder what it was about her that had captivated him so. In all his years of business, he had met countless people, some brilliant, some ruthless, but none like Mia. She was different. There was a quiet strength in her, a calmness that he could never have predicted. She had a past, that much was obvious. A past she wasn't ready to share with him. But there was something about her eyes, something in the way she carried herself, that made him want to know more. It wasn't just gratitude for her saving him. It was something deeper, something he couldn't explain. Victor took a deep breath and picked up his phone. He dialed a number, his fingers moving with purpose. The phone rang twice before it was answered. "David, I need a favor." David Mercer, his chief of staff, responded with a tone that was both curious and alert. "Of course, Mr. Hawthorne. What can I do for you?" "I need to know everything about Mia," Victor said, his voice low. David paused for a moment, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Mia? The waitress?" Victor's gaze was fixed on the city below. "Yes, the one who saved my life the other night. Find out everything you can about her. I want to know who she really is." David didn't hesitate. "I'll get on it right away." Victor hung up, his mind already moving to the next step. He knew that Mia wasn't someone who would easily open up about her past. But he had resources, and he wasn't above using them. What he didn't expect was how quickly the pieces would fall into place. Later that afternoon, David returned to his office with a file in hand. "I've gathered everything, Mr. Hawthorne," he said, placing the file on the desk. Victor took it, his eyes scanning the contents. Mia's name was not on the surface of the file, but it didn't matter. He already knew what he was looking for. As he flipped through the pages, a picture of Mia began to form. Born in a small town in New Jersey, she had lived a quiet life with her mother and younger brother. There was no record of her father, no mention of any close family outside of them. She had attended college, studying criminal justice before dropping out after a year. A few jobs here and there, mostly in service, with nothing noteworthy until her time at the Grandview Hotel. But there was one thing that stood out. Mia had a background in security and defense. She had once been part of a program designed to train people in high-risk environments, though she had left the program abruptly after a personal incident. Victor's mind raced as he processed the information. Mia had been trained in ways he hadn't even imagined. She wasn't just a waitress. She was someone with skills that could be invaluable. He sat back in his chair, a new level of respect forming in his mind. But there was still one question that lingered. Why had she walked away from that life? What had happened to make her so guarded? He needed answers. But as he sat there, thinking about how to approach her again, a sudden knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Victor called, his tone sharp. The door opened, and a familiar face appeared. It was one of his top security personnel, looking serious as always. "Mr. Hawthorne, we've had an issue." Victor raised an eyebrow. "What kind of issue?" "It's about Mia," the security officer said, stepping inside. "There's been an attempted break-in at her apartment." Victor's pulse quickened. "What? Is she all right?" "She's fine for now, but we think it's related to something in her past. Someone is trying to get to her." Victor stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Where is she now?" The officer hesitated. "She's moved, sir. We're tracking her, but she's taking extra precautions. She's not exactly making it easy for us to follow." Victor clenched his fists. "Do we know who's behind this?" "Not yet, but we're working on it." The officer's voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of urgency in his words. "I'll keep you updated." Victor didn't respond immediately. His mind was already racing. Someone was after Mia, and if they were coming for her, he needed to make sure she was safe. This wasn't just about gratitude anymore. It was about protecting someone who had already done far more for him than he had ever expected. "Keep me posted," Victor said, his voice calm but firm. As the officer left the room, Victor's thoughts turned to Mia. Whoever was after her, he wasn't going to let them hurt her. Not on his watch. He didn't know yet how he was going to help her, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her face whatever this was alone. He picked up his phone once again, dialing the number that had been haunting his thoughts. He needed to talk to Mia. He needed to make sure she was all right. But more than that, he needed to know why she had walked away from everything she could have had. He wasn't going to let her slip away. Not now. Not when he finally understood just how much she meant to him. When the phone rang, he didn't wait for it to stop ringing before speaking. "Mia, it's Victor. We need to talk." Victor's pulse quickened as he stood in the middle of his office, the phone pressed to his ear. The voice on the other end was clear, calm, and determined. "Mia's gone off the grid. We can't track her anymore." His mind raced. She had to know he was trying to help. Why would she disappear now, especially after everything that had happened? The connection between them was undeniable, and yet here she was, retreating back into the shadows. He had been waiting for her to answer his call, to make sense of what was happening, but now he was faced with the harsh reality that she wasn't going to make it easy. "How did she know we were tracking her?" Victor asked, a tinge of frustration creeping into his voice. "She's good at this, Mr. Hawthorne. She's trained. But it's more than that. She's trying to protect you." The officer's words hit like a punch to the gut. Protect him? Why? Mia had saved him. Yes, but why was she pushing him away now? Was it because of her past, or was there something more? "Get the team on it. I need to know where she's gone," Victor ordered, his voice steady, but with an underlying urgency. "I don't care how long it takes. Find her." As soon as he hung up, the weight of the situation settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He wasn't used to feeling helpless. He had always been the one in control, the one who made the decisions. But Mia? She was different. She was an enigma. A woman who had saved his life, who had the skills to navigate a world of danger that he didn't even know existed. And now she was gone, slipping further away with every passing second. Victor couldn't let her slip away. He wouldn't. He couldn't help but think of the words she had said the other night when he had asked her about her past. She had been so guarded, so determined not to let him in. "You've been hiding for too long," he had told her. "It's time to stop running." Had those words meant something? Had she heard him, or had she just seen him as another wealthy man trying to get something from her? He had to find her. He had to make her understand that he wasn't like the others. He wasn't going to push her into something she wasn't ready for. He wanted to help. He wanted to protect her the way she had protected him. As the hours passed, Victor found himself pacing his office, his thoughts consumed by Mia. He had tried calling her phone again, but there was no answer. It was as if she had vanished completely. The city below him seemed distant, unimportant in comparison to the situation at hand. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. He needed to act. He pulled out his phone once again, dialing a new number. "David, give me everything you can on Mia's past. Don't just give me the basics. I want to know everything. Where she's been, who she's worked for, everything. We're running out of time." "Understood, Mr. Hawthorne," David replied, his tone as professional as ever. "I'll have the information for you soon." Victor hung up, his mind already working on the next steps. He couldn't afford to let her slip away. Not now. Not after everything that had happened between them. He needed to find her, to understand why she was pulling away. What was she hiding? And why couldn't she let anyone close? As the night stretched on, Victor's resolve hardened. He wouldn't give up on her. He would find Mia, and when he did, he would make her see that she didn't have to hide anymore. But little did he know, Mia wasn't running from him. She was running from the very thing that had haunted her for years. The dark, dangerous forces from her past that she had hoped to leave behind. But now, it seemed they were catching up with her. Mia's phone rang again, but she ignored it. She couldn't talk to Victor, not now. She couldn't let him get involved in her mess. She had been on the run for so long, constantly looking over her shoulder. But now, with the knowledge that her past was coming to find her again, she felt the walls closing in. She couldn't let Victor get dragged into this. She couldn't let him become another pawn in a game she couldn't control. Mia's hands tightened around the steering wheel as she drove through the darkened streets of the city, her thoughts a whirlwind of doubt and fear. She had known she couldn't keep running forever, but she had hoped to buy herself some time. Time to figure out how to fix things, time to keep Victor safe. But now, it seemed, time was no longer on her side. The phone rang again, and this time, Mia didn't hesitate. She answered it. Mia, Victor's voice, came through the line, warm and familiar, but also filled with an edge of concern. Where are you? Mia's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. I'm fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just need some time. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mia, please. I don't know what's going on, but I need you to trust me. The sincerity in his voice made her hesitate, just for a moment. But then the reality of her situation hit her again. She couldn't do this. Not with him. You don't understand, she said, her voice cracking. You don't know what I'm running from. Then tell me, Victor urged. Let me help you. Mia's eyes closed for a moment as she drove, the weight of everything she had kept hidden pressing down on her. She couldn't drag him into this. He didn't deserve it. I can't, she whispered, and before he could respond, she hung up, the silence of the car now deafening. She wasn't sure what came next, but she knew one thing. She couldn't keep running forever. And soon, she would have to face the past she had left behind, with or without Victor by her side. Victor sat in his office late into the night, the lights of the city sprawling before him, yet his mind was elsewhere. The phone call with Mia had left him restless, her words lingering in his thoughts. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was keeping something from him. She had saved his life, and now, when he tried to offer her help, she was pushing him away. It didn't make sense. Why would someone who had saved him from certain danger shut herself off? What was she afraid of? His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. David's message flashed on the screen, but Victor didn't need to open it to know what it said. I found her. Victor's heart skipped a beat. The words were simple, yet they held the promise of something he couldn't ignore. He immediately dialed David's number, his voice urgent. Where is she? I've tracked her down to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, David replied. She's staying off the grid, but she hasn't left yet. We've got a team watching her place. I need to see her, Victor said, his voice low but firm. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Victor didn't wait for a response. He grabbed his coat, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He couldn't allow Mia to slip away again. He needed answers. As he stepped into the elevator and descended to the ground floor, his mind raced. The woman who had saved him was hiding, and he was determined to find out why. The drive across town felt like it took forever. His mind kept going back to the same question. What was Mia hiding? What had she been through that made her retreat into herself like this? Was it because of the danger she had been running from all these years? Or was it something deeper, something from her past that she couldn't escape? The thought gnawed at him. As he approached the building where Mia had been staying, Victor's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, but he knew he couldn't back out now. This was bigger than just gratitude. This was about her safety. This was about understanding who she truly was. Victor parked his car a block away, the streetlights flickering in the distance. He didn't want to draw attention to himself. He had no idea how Mia would react to seeing him again, but he couldn't leave without talking to her. He needed to make her understand that he was on her side. He walked quickly to the building, his steps quick and purposeful. When he reached the entrance, he checked the security cameras, his eyes scanning the dark hallway. It was quiet, too quiet. As he walked up the stairs, he felt the tension in the air, as if something was about to happen. He reached the door to her apartment, his heart pounding in his chest. He hesitated for a moment before knocking, his fist making a soft tap against the wood. Silence. He knocked again, louder this time, but still no response. "Mia, it's Victor," he called out, his voice firm but gentle. "Please open the door." He waited, but there was still no answer. He couldn't wait any longer. Victor took a deep breath and reached for the handle, testing it. It was unlocked. His heart raced as he pushed the door open. The apartment was small, dimly lit, with sparse furniture. There were no personal touches, no indication that anyone truly lived here. It was as if Mia was just passing through, living out of a suitcase, a ghost in her own life. "Mia?" Victor called again, his voice now filled with concern. He walked further inside, his eyes scanning the room. And then he saw her. She was standing by the window, her back to him, her face unreadable. She had changed since the last time he saw her. There was a hardness in her posture, an emotional wall that hadn't been there before. "Mia," he said softly, taking a step closer. She stiffened at the sound of his voice, but didn't turn around. "I told you to stay away," she said, her voice quiet but filled with unmistakable pain. "You don't understand." Victor's breath caught in his throat. He could feel the weight of her words. "Then make me understand," he urged. "You don't have to face this alone." Mia shook her head slowly. "You don't know what you're asking for," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You have no idea what's at stake." "Then tell me," Victor insisted, stepping closer. "Tell me what's going on, and let me help you." She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. There was so much she wanted to say, so much she wanted to explain, but the words wouldn't come. Mia's walls had been built over years, layer by layer, to keep herself safe, to keep everyone at a distance. And yet, here she was, standing in front of the one person who refused to walk away, the one person who had been pulling at those walls, trying to break them down. She felt vulnerable in a way she never had before. She opened her mouth to speak, but then the door slammed shut behind them. Victor turned quickly, his instincts kicking in. The room was dark. Too dark. Someone was in here with them. Mia's eyes widened, and before she could react, Victor grabbed her, pulling her behind him. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he scanned the room. He hadn't come here just to confront Mia. He had come to protect her. And now, he realized, that was exactly what he was going to have to do. Victor's eyes scanned the room in a flash, every muscle in his body alert as he stood between Mia and the door. His senses heightened. He felt the tension in the air, thick with the unknown. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the city outside. Mia's breath hitched behind him, her body pressed close to his. But he couldn't turn to look at her now, not with the threat looming over them. Whoever had entered the room was staying hidden in the shadows, making no sound except the soft shuffle of feet on the floor. The hairs on the back of Victor's neck stood up. His instincts screamed that they were not alone. "Who's there?" Victor called out, his voice steady, even though every nerve in his body was on high alert. No response, but he didn't expect one. Whoever was here wanted to stay unseen. His mind raced, trying to process the situation. He could hear faint breathing from the corner of the room, barely audible, but enough to confirm that there was someone, or something, hiding. Mia, still pressed against his back, barely made a sound. Victor could feel the tension in her, too. She was no stranger to danger. But this wasn't the kind of fight she was used to. This was different. He had to keep her safe, no matter what. Without a word, he slowly began to move toward the dark corner of the room, his footsteps calculated, careful not to alert whoever was hiding to his exact position. Mia's breathing steadied slightly as she followed his lead, inching closer to him, but not yet making a move. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The last thing he needed was for her to get hurt because of him. The second his hand reached the corner, he swung around, his eyes narrowing as he finally spotted the figure. It was a man, crouched low, his face half hidden in the shadows. He was armed. A gun gleamed faintly in his hand, the barrel pointed directly at Victor. Not a step closer. The man growled, his voice rough and cold. Victor didn't flinch. His mind worked quickly. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice a controlled mixture of authority and calm. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he tightened his grip on the weapon, clearly weighing his options. But Victor wasn't one to be intimidated. The man shifted slightly, his eyes darting between Victor and Mia. "Stay back," he repeated, his voice quieter, but the threat in it unmistakable. For a brief moment, the world seemed to slow. Mia's presence behind him grounded Victor, and he realized something crucial. Whoever this man was, he wasn't here just for them. He was part of something bigger, something much darker. A shadowy figure from Mia's past, sent to finish what had begun long ago. Victor's thoughts shifted, and in that moment, he understood why Mia had pushed him away. She hadn't been protecting herself. She had been trying to protect him from this. "You don't have to do this," Victor said, his voice lowering, trying to reason with the man. "Put the gun down, and we can talk this out." The man's laugh was bitter, almost derisive. "Talk," he spat, his eyes narrowing. "There's nothing to talk about. She's the target. You're just in the way." Victor's jaw tightened. He couldn't let this continue. "I won't let you hurt her," he said, his voice firm, his body tensing as he prepared for what was coming. Mia's hand brushed against his back, her touch light but reassuring. She wasn't afraid, at least not anymore. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, but Victor could hear the determination in her voice. For the first time, he realized the true depth of what she had been through. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She had been fighting for her survival for years, long before they had crossed paths. And now, this man, this threat from her past, was coming to collect. Victor moved in a blur, his reflexes taking over as he lunged for the man, knocking the gun from his hand in one swift motion. The man was caught off guard, his own instincts not fast enough to match Victor's. A struggle ensued, but Victor was quicker, using his training to subdue the man, pinning him against the wall. The man grunted in frustration, but it was clear he wasn't going to win this fight. Mia stepped forward cautiously, her eyes still fixed on the man in front of her. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice cold, sharp. The man sneered, refusing to answer. Victor pressed harder, his grip tightening. "Tell us what we need to know. Who's behind this?" The man's silence was a challenge, but Victor knew how to break it. He gave the man a warning look, his eyes cold with determination. "Tell us, or I'll make you." Mia moved closer to Victor, her eyes never leaving the man as she spoke again. "You know you don't want to do this," she said softly, but her voice held a dangerous edge. "Tell us who sent you, and you walk out of here." The man hesitated, his gaze flicking between the two of them, calculating his next move. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "You don't understand. It's bigger than you think. They'll come for you both." His words hung in the air, heavy with a sense of finality. "Who?" Victor asked urgently. The man's lips twisted into a grim smile, but he didn't answer. Instead, he lunged forward, trying to break free, but Victor was faster. In one swift motion, he had the man restrained again, his back pressed firmly against the wall. "Enough," Victor said coldly. "If you don't tell us who's behind this, I'll make sure you never walk out of here." The man's defiance finally crumbled, and with a final, almost imperceptible sigh, he whispered one name. "The Syndicate." Victor's eyes narrowed. The Syndicate. It was the name of an underground organization that controlled much of the city's illicit dealings. He had heard rumors, but nothing that concrete. Nothing this dangerous. As the man finally went limp, his strength fading, Victor turned to Mia, his mind racing. "The Syndicate," he muttered under his breath. "We need to get out of here." Mia nodded silently, the gravity of the situation settling over them both. This was just the beginning, and neither of them knew where it would lead, but they were in it together now. Victor stood frozen for a moment, the words "the Syndicate" echoing in his mind. His grip tightened on the man who had just tried to make a final stand, but the reality of the situation began to sink in. The Syndicate, he had heard whispers about it before. An underground organization that controlled most of the city's illicit activities, their reach long and dangerous. He never thought he'd be involved with them, let alone fighting to protect someone who seemed so out of place in that world. He turned to Mia, his thoughts running wild. "The Syndicate," he repeated, his voice low, filled with disbelief and a sense of urgency. Mia, still close behind him, didn't show surprise. Her face was calm, almost too calm, as though she had expected this moment, but was still trying to decide what to do next. "What now?" Victor asked, his eyes scanning her face, searching for some sign of what she was thinking. She paused for a long beat, her eyes flickering briefly toward the man still pinned to the wall. "We keep moving," she said quietly, but there was a strength in her voice that Victor recognized. This wasn't fear speaking. It was survival. The Syndicate won't stop, and they won't forget what happened tonight. Victor knew she was right. This wasn't over. We can't stay here. They'll be looking for us. We need to leave, now. Mia nodded, her gaze unwavering. She stepped forward, her movements steady and deliberate. We need to make sure they don't trace us. They'll know who I am, and they'll come after you if they find out you're involved. Victor felt the weight of her words. You don't need to protect me, Mia, he said, his voice urgent. I'm already in this. I won't let them hurt you. Her eyes softened for a moment, but then she turned and moved toward the door. Stay close, she instructed. We're going to get out of here, but you have to trust me. This isn't something you can fix with money or connections. Victor followed her, his heart racing. He had been in plenty of tight situations before, but this felt different. Mia was different. She wasn't just a part of the world he knew. She was a part of a world he didn't understand, one that was filled with danger and secrets. And somehow, he had become entangled in it. As they reached the door, Mia paused. She glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. You should go back to your life, she said softly. You've already done more than enough. Victor shook his head firmly. No, I'm not going anywhere. She stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing her options. Finally, she sighed. Then keep up and stay out of sight. We move fast, and we don't stop until we're safe. Mia led the way down the stairs, her steps quick and purposeful. Victor followed closely behind, his mind still spinning. The Syndicate was real. The threat was real. And Mia had been living with this for far longer than he could ever have imagined. The streets outside were quiet, but the stillness was unsettling. Mia seemed to know exactly where she was going, moving with an almost practiced ease, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Victor tried to keep up, but he couldn't help but feel out of place. He wasn't used to being the one who had to rely on someone else for direction. But Mia had made it clear that she wasn't going to let him do this alone. And he wasn't about to back down now. They moved swiftly through the darkened streets, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. Mia led him through alleyways and back streets, places Victor never would have dared venture on his own. But she was always a step ahead, always thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. As they neared the edge of the city, the buildings became sparser, the roads quieter. Mia stopped at a black car parked along the curb, its engine running. She glanced around quickly before opening the door. Get in, she said, her tone clipped. Victor didn't hesitate. He climbed into the passenger seat, glancing around nervously as Mia slammed the door shut behind him. The car sped off into the night, weaving through the empty streets, its tires screeching as it took sharp corners. The city was fading behind them, but the tension in the air was still thick. Mia's eyes never left the road, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. Where are we going? Victor asked, breaking the silence. Mia didn't answer right away. She just drove, her grip on the wheel tight, her jaw clenched. You'll see, she said finally, her voice cold. We just need to lay low for a while. Get out of the city. Victor felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The Syndicate was coming, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. But he wasn't going to let them take Mia. Not after everything she had done for him. As the car sped into the night, Victor made a promise to himself. He would protect her, no matter what. Whatever it took, he wasn't going to let her face this alone. And as they left the city behind, heading into the unknown, he realized that the fight for survival had only just begun. The car sped through the night, the headlights cutting through the darkness as Mia navigated the unfamiliar road. The sound of the engine hummed steadily, but Victor's thoughts were far from calm. His mind raced, the reality of the situation pressing down on him with every passing mile. They had barely escaped the apartment, but the danger wasn't over. It was just beginning. The Syndicate was coming, and they had no intention of letting Mia slip through their fingers. The way that man had spoken before, like he knew exactly who Mia was and what she had done, sent chills down his spine. Victor glanced at Mia. Her face was calm, but there was a tightness around her jaw, an unreadable expression in her eyes. It was as if she was already 10 steps ahead, planning their next move, but she wasn't sharing her thoughts. He wanted to ask her questions, to understand why she was so distant, but he knew better than to push. She had always kept her cards close to her chest, and he had learned not to pry. Yet now, with everything at stake, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more she wasn't telling him. Where are we going? Victor asked quietly, breaking the silence. Mia didn't immediately respond. She just kept her eyes on the road, her hands gripping the wheel with precision. The speedometer hovered just over 80 miles per hour. "Somewhere safe," she replied at last, her voice firm but tired. "It's the only place we can hide." "Hide from who?" Victor pressed. "From the people who want to finish what they started," Mia said, her tone hardening. "The Syndicate. They won't stop until they find me." The words stung, not because Victor didn't understand the danger, but because Mia said them as if she had accepted it as her fate. She wasn't running anymore. She was waiting for them to catch up. Victor's heart clenched at the thought. "You don't have to do this alone, Mia," he said, his voice quieter now. "I'm here. We can fight this together." Mia's grip on the wheel tightened, and she exhaled slowly. "You don't understand," she said, her voice laced with a mixture of frustration and sadness. "You can't just walk into my world, Victor. You have no idea what you're up against. The Syndicate doesn't just go away. You can't buy your way out of this. You can't make deals. It's not like that." Her words hit him, harder than he expected. For the first time, he saw the weight of everything she had been through, the burden she had carried alone for so long, the fear she had tried to shield him from. It wasn't just a criminal organization she was running from. It was a world of violence, secrecy, and power that he could never fully understand. "I'm not trying to buy my way out of anything," Victor said firmly. "I'm trying to help you." Mia didn't look at him, but her voice softened slightly. "You're not the first person to say that, Victor. But everyone who's ever tried to help me has gotten hurt. That's why I keep people at arm's length. Because if I let you in, you become a target too." Victor felt a pang in his chest. She was right. She had built walls around herself, and for good reason. But he wasn't like the others. He had never run from a fight, and he wasn't about to start now. "I'm not going anywhere, Mia," he said, his voice steady. "You're not alone in this. Not anymore." Mia was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the rush of the wind outside the car and the steady rhythm of the tires on the road. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "I never wanted you to be a part of this. But now that you are, I'll protect you. I won't let them hurt you." Victor's heart surged at her words. She was trying to push him away, but in doing so, she had just let him in the only way she knew how. "You don't have to protect me, Mia," he said gently. "I'm not afraid of them. I'm afraid of losing you." The words hung in the air between them. Mia didn't respond. She just drove, her face set in concentration, as if the weight of their situation had grown even heavier in the silence. The road stretched on, the night growing deeper, darker. They were headed into the unknown, and neither of them knew what lay ahead. But one thing was certain, Victor wasn't about to let go. The Syndicate could come for them, but they were going to have to do a lot more than that to take Mia down. They drove in silence for a while longer, each lost in their own thoughts. But the tension between them was palpable. Victor could feel it, the pull between them growing stronger despite the danger. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he couldn't let her go. He couldn't let them break her. As the city lights faded behind them, replaced by the quiet darkness of the open road, Mia finally spoke again. "You're right," she said, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "You're not like the others. But that doesn't mean this is going to be easy." "I never said it would be," Victor replied, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "But I'm in this, Mia. All the way." Mia glanced at him then, her eyes softer than they had been before. "I know," she said quietly, "and that's why I'm not letting you out of my sight." And with that, they both knew. There was no turning back now. The car slowed to a stop in the middle of the dense forest, its headlights illuminating the narrow dirt path that twisted ahead. Mia turned off the engine, the silence of the night enveloping them. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the wind and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Victor looked around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. It was a far cry from the hustle and bustle of the city they had left behind. But it was the kind of place Mia knew well, isolated, hidden, and far from the prying eyes of the Syndicate. "We're safe here for now," Mia said, her voice breaking the silence. She didn't meet his gaze as she spoke, her eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced caution. Victor nodded, though he could feel the tension in the air between them. "How long do we stay?" he asked quietly, keeping his voice low. Mia's fingers drummed on the steering wheel, a nervous habit Victor had come to recognize. "Until we figure out our next move," she replied, her tone distant. "But we need to lay low. They're already looking for us." Victor's heart sank. He had known the situation was dangerous, But hearing Mia say it so plainly made it all the more real. The Syndicate was out there, and they were hunting them both. He had always known his wealth and power couldn't protect him from everything, but now he was beginning to understand the true depth of the threat Mia had been running from. He glanced over at her, noticing how exhausted she looked. Her face was drawn, the usual fire in her eyes dimmed by the weight of their circumstances. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but he didn't know how. She had pushed him away so many times, and even now, she kept her distance. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly, his voice full of sincerity. Mia's gaze flickered to him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, he thought she might say something, but then her walls went back up. "I'm not alone," she replied, her voice hardening. "I've always been alone." Victor's heart clenched. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her, fighting this battle in the shadows, all by herself. The thought of her facing such danger, without anyone by her side, made him want to do whatever it took to keep her safe. "That's not true," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here, Mia. I'm not going anywhere." She turned away from him, her eyes focusing on the trees outside. "You should go back to your life, Victor," she said, her voice quieter now. "You don't belong in this world." The words stung more than he expected. He knew she was trying to protect him, but it wasn't what he wanted to hear. "I've already told you. I'm not leaving," he said, his voice firm with determination. "This is my fight now, too." Mia remained silent, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the situation hung between them like a heavy cloud, and Victor could feel the distance growing wider. He didn't understand why Mia was so intent on pushing him away, but he was starting to realize that it wasn't just about him. She had her reasons, her secrets, and he wasn't sure if he would ever understand them all. But he wasn't going to give up on her. He wasn't going to let her carry this burden alone anymore. Finally, Mia broke the silence. "There's something you don't know," she said, her voice low. "Something about my past. About why the Syndicate is after me." Victor leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her. "What is it?" he asked, his voice full of concern. She hesitated, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "I wasn't always just a waitress," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I used to be someone else. Someone important." Victor's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. He had known there was more to her than met the eye, but the depth of her past was a mystery he hadn't even begun to understand. "What happened?" he asked gently, not wanting to push her too hard, but needing to know. Mia exhaled sharply, her eyes focused on the road ahead. "I was part of an operation. A covert mission. I worked with people who had connections in the highest levels of power. But it went wrong. People died, and I was left to clean up the mess." Her words were like a punch to the gut. Victor couldn't imagine what she had been through. To be caught in a world of violence and secrecy, only to be abandoned when it all fell apart. It was enough to break anyone. "The Syndicate is connected to that mission," Mia continued, her voice flat. "They want me dead because I know too much. I've seen things, Victor, things that could bring them down, and they won't stop until they silence me." Victor felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The stakes had just gotten a whole lot higher. This wasn't just about Mia's past. It was about their lives, their futures, and the dangerous people who were hunting them. "We'll figure it out," Victor said, his voice steady despite the growing fear inside. "We'll take them down together." Mia's eyes flickered to him, and for the briefest moment, he saw a spark of something in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or just the smallest crack in her armor. "I don't know if you're ready for that," she said quietly, "but I can't do this alone." "Then we'll do it together," Victor said, his voice unwavering. "And I'm not backing down." The car started moving again, the road ahead uncertain, but for the first time, Victor felt like they were truly in this together. The fight was far from over, but as long as they had each other, maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Victor and Mia drove through the night, the car's headlights slicing through the darkness, their only company the occasional rustle of leaves from the wind outside. The tension between them had softened. Slightly after their conversation, Mia had shared more than she had in days, revealing just a glimpse of the life she had tried so hard to keep hidden. But even as she opened up, Victor knew there was still so much she wasn't saying, and he wasn't sure if she ever would. The weight of the situation was heavy, but he refused to let go. They were in this together now. As the miles passed, Mia remained focused on the road, her eyes scanning their surroundings with practiced caution. She had driven this route 100 times before, each time with the same urgency, the same feeling of being hunted. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, Victor was with her. Tonight, she wasn't alone. "Do you have a plan?" Victor asked, his voice breaking the silence. Mia glanced over at him briefly, her expression unreadable. "I always have a plan," she replied, her tone sharp but not unkind. "But sometimes, plans don't survive contact with the enemy." Victor nodded, understanding the truth behind her words. He had lived in a world where everything was calculated, where success came from carefully constructed strategies and backups for the backups. But Mia's world was different. Her world was one of constant change, constant danger. "What happens next?" Victor pressed, not letting his curiosity fade. "Next, we wait," Mia said, her eyes fixed on the road again. "We lay low, keep moving, and figure out what they want." Victor leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. He knew Mia was right. The Syndicate wouldn't stop until they found her. And it wasn't just her life at stake anymore. It was his, too. The thought didn't scare him. He had faced danger before, but this was different. He wasn't fighting for a business deal or a power grab. He was fighting for someone he cared about, someone who had proven she was worth the fight. But Mia didn't seem to see it that way. "Why won't you let me help you?" Victor asked, his voice softer now. Mia didn't respond at first. She just kept driving, her grip on the wheel tight. After a long pause, she spoke. "Because you don't know what you're getting into, Victor. You think you do, but you don't. You're not built for this." Victor's heart tightened at her words. He wasn't built for this. He had fought battles before, had navigated the cutthroat world of business and politics. He had taken risks that had paid off. But Mia's world, the one she had been thrust into, was something he couldn't even begin to understand. Still, he wasn't backing down. "You're wrong," he said firmly. "I'm in this now. There's no turning back." Mia shot him a quick glance, her lips pressed together in a tight line. She didn't say anything, but he could see the conflict in her eyes. "This isn't just about you or me," she finally said. "It's about survival. We're not fighting a war we can win by playing by the rules. The Syndicate doesn't care about rules. They'll destroy anyone who gets in their way, and they don't stop until they've taken everything." Victor couldn't deny the truth in her words. The Syndicate was ruthless, but he wasn't afraid. "Then we don't play by their rules," he said, his voice steady. "We fight dirty if we have to. We fight smarter." Mia's eyes flickered to him, and for a moment, he saw something soften in her gaze. Maybe it was a spark of hope, or maybe it was just exhaustion, but it was enough for him to know that he wasn't as far from her as she thought. "You don't know what you're asking for," she said quietly. "I've lost people, Victor. People who tried to help me. And I've been the one to bury them. I won't let that happen to you." Victor's chest tightened at her words. He didn't know what had happened in her past, but he knew it had scarred her. He could see the weight of it in the way she carried herself, the way she kept her distance. "Mia," he said, his voice soft but insistent, "I'm not going anywhere. If this is about you keeping me safe, then you don't get to make that decision for me. I'm in this for the long haul." She didn't respond immediately, but her hands loosened on the steering wheel just a fraction. "I don't want to be the reason you get hurt," she said quietly. Victor's heart ached as he looked at her. He could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of letting someone in and losing them all over again. But he wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't going to leave her to fight this battle alone. "Mia, we'll get through this together," he said, his voice calm and steady. "You're not alone." The words hung in the air between them as the car continued its journey down the dark, winding road. There was still so much ahead of them. The Syndicate was closing in, and they had no way of knowing what the future held. But for the first time in what felt like a long while, Mia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, Victor was right. Maybe they could do this together. The road stretched out in front of them, dark and uncertain, but as long as they had each other, they might just have a chance to survive. The car slowed as they approached a small, run-down motel at the edge of the city, the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. It was the perfect spot to lay low, to disappear for a while and regroup. The flickering neon sign above the motel cast an eerie glow, but it was better than anywhere else. Mia pulled the car into a parking spot near the entrance, the tires crunching on the gravel. She turned off the engine, and for a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of everything that had happened between them pressing down on both of them. Victor glanced over at Mia, watching her as she stared out the windshield, her eyes distant. He could tell she was still processing, still holding something back. He wanted to push, to ask her more questions, but he knew she wasn't ready to open up. Not yet. We're safe here for the moment, Mia said quietly, breaking the silence. She didn't look at him, her voice calm, but there was an undercurrent of exhaustion in her tone. But we can't stay long. The Syndicate won't stop looking for us. Victor nodded, but his mind was already working. He knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. The Syndicate was too powerful, too connected. They would find them eventually. But for now, they needed time. Time to plan. Time to figure out how to take down the people who had been hunting Mia for so long. What's the next step? Victor asked, his voice steady. Mia looked over at him then, her expression unreadable. We need to get to the source, she said, her voice low. The Syndicate is a massive operation, but someone has to be pulling the strings. I need to find out who and why they're after me. Victor felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about revenge. About finding the people who had caused so much pain and stopping them before they could do more damage. And how do we do that? Victor asked. Mia leaned back in her seat, her eyes narrowing as she thought. I have contacts, she said slowly. People who can help, but it's dangerous. I can't just show up and ask for information without putting them at risk too. We can handle it, Victor said, his voice firm. We've already been through worse. We'll figure it out. Mia met his gaze, and for the first time since they had started this journey, Victor saw something change in her eyes. There was trust there, a tentative, fragile trust that he hadn't seen before. All right, Mia said after a long pause. We'll do this your way, but we move fast, and we don't get caught. Victor nodded. I'm with you every step of the way. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it. Together, they stepped out of the car and made their way to the motel's office, the sounds of their footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. Inside, the motel clerk didn't ask any questions as Mia paid for the room, her face unreadable. She didn't look back at Victor as they walked down the hallway, the faint smell of stale carpet filling the air. They reached their room, and Mia opened the door, glancing around before stepping inside. Victor followed, his eyes scanning the small, dingy space. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now, we'll need to lay low for a few days, Mia said, locking the door behind them. Let things cool down. Victor nodded. I'll take first watch. Mia raised an eyebrow. You really don't trust me to keep watch? It's not about trust, Victor said, his voice steady. It's about being prepared. Mia let out a small laugh, the first genuine laugh he had heard from her in days. You're too serious, she said, shaking her head. But fine. I'll take second watch. She set her bag on the bed and began to unpack, pulling out a few simple items, some clothes, a few weapons, a few tools. Victor watched her, feeling a strange mixture of admiration and worry. He still didn't know the full extent of what she had been through, but the woman standing in front of him wasn't someone he would ever underestimate. She was strong, resourceful, and deadly when she needed to be. But there was something else there too. Something vulnerable that she kept hidden beneath the surface. Something that he wasn't sure he could reach. You okay? Victor asked, breaking the silence. Mia froze for a moment, her hands stilling as she looked up at him. For a second, she said nothing, but then she nodded, her expression unreadable. I'm fine, she said, her voice quiet. But Victor saw the way her shoulders tensed, the way her jaw clenched. She wasn't fine. He could see that. He wanted to push her to talk, to tell him what was really going on, but he knew it wouldn't help. She had to open up on her own terms. I'm here when you're ready to talk, he said quietly, his voice calm but firm. Mia didn't answer right away. She just turned away from him, her eyes flicking toward the window. After a long silence, she spoke. I didn't ask for this, she said, her voice low. I didn't ask for any of it. But it's the life I have now. Victor nodded, understanding more than he could express. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it. And whatever came next, he was going to make sure Mia didn't face it alone. The days that followed were a blur of constant movement and careful planning. Mia and Victor kept to the shadows, using back roads and hidden paths to avoid detection. They knew the Syndicate was still hunting them, but every day they managed to stay one step ahead. For once, Victor felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something worth more than money, more than power. He was fighting for Mia. The deeper they got into this fight, the more Victor understood about her past. It wasn't just the Syndicate she was running from. It was the ghosts of everything she had lost, the lives she had been forced to leave behind, and the things she had done to survive. But even with all that, Mia wasn't giving up. She was a survivor, and she had fought her way out of darkness more times than Victor could count. In their hidden refuge, a small cabin tucked away in the woods, they started making their move. They had a plan. It was dangerous, risky, and maybe even reckless, but it was their only chance. Victor knew the Syndicate would come for them with everything they had, but they had learned how to strike back. Mia had contacts, people who owed her favors from her past life, people who could help them get the information they needed to bring down the Syndicate from the inside. Victor had grown to trust her completely. The more they worked together, the more he realized that there was no going back. He wasn't just here to help her anymore. He was in this fight as much as she was. It was dark when they finally put their plan into action. Mia had received a tip that one of the Syndicate's key players would be at an abandoned warehouse just outside of town. It was their chance to get vital information, maybe even a lead on the Syndicate's leadership. They couldn't pass it up. Mia was in her element now, moving through the shadows like a ghost, her eyes sharp, scanning every corner. Victor followed her closely, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He knew the risks, but he also knew they couldn't afford to hesitate. As they reached the warehouse, Victor's heart pounded in his chest. He had been in high-stakes situations before, but this felt different. This was personal. "You ready?" Mia whispered, her voice low but confident. Victor nodded, his gaze never leaving the building ahead of them. "Ready as I'll ever be." They moved quickly, slipping inside the warehouse through a side entrance. The air was thick with dust and the scent of rusted metal. The warehouse was empty, save for a few scattered crates and the faint sounds of voices coming from deeper inside. Mia motioned for him to follow, and they crept down a narrow corridor, staying low to the ground. The closer they got, the more tense the atmosphere became. Mia's hand instinctively went to the small pistol tucked into her waistband, ready for whatever was ahead. As they turned the corner, they saw two men standing guard, their backs to them. Mia signaled for Victor to stay silent, and they both crouched behind a stack of crates, listening. "You sure about this?" one of the men said, his voice muffled by the distance. "Yeah, it's good," the other man replied. "We meet him at midnight. He's got the info we need." "Right," the first man muttered. "Let's get this over with." Mia and Victor exchanged a glance. The time was now. They couldn't let this opportunity slip by. Mia gave Victor a subtle nod, then sprang into action. She moved with the precision of someone who had been trained to handle these kinds of situations. Victor followed her lead, his instincts kicking in. In a few quick moves, they took out the guards without making a sound, leaving them unconscious on the ground. "We're in," Mia whispered, her eyes scanning the room for the next move. They crept forward, moving deeper into the warehouse. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and soon, they saw the man they had been waiting for. He was standing with a briefcase, his back turned to them as he spoke into a phone. Mia signaled for Victor to stay hidden while she approached. Her movements were fluid, controlled, like a shadow in the dark. She silently crept up behind the man, her hand on the handle of the pistol, ready to strike. As she got closer, her heart raced. This was it. She had to be quick. She reached out, grabbed the man by the shoulder, and spun him around, pressing the barrel of the gun to his chest. The man froze, his eyes wide with shock. "Who the hell are you?" he spat, but Mia didn't flinch. "Shut up," she said, her voice cold and steady. "Tell me everything you know about the Syndicate." The man's face twisted with defiance, but Mia pressed the gun harder against his chest, not giving him a chance to escape. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man lied, but Mia could tell he was bluffing. "Don't play games," she said sharply. "You know exactly what I'm asking. Who's in charge? Who's pulling the strings?" The man hesitated, and for a moment, Mia thought he might not talk. But then, he sighed and dropped his head, defeated. "You don't know what you're getting into," he said, his voice low. "They're everywhere. You can't fight them." "We're already fighting," Mia said, her eyes narrowing. "Now, tell me what I want to." "No." The man finally relented, his words spilling out in a hurried rush. "It's a man named Decker. He's the one behind everything. The Syndicate. He controls it all. Mia's heart skipped a beat. Decker. The name sent a chill down her spine. She had heard the rumors, the whispers, but she hadn't expected him to be this close. Where can I find him? She demanded. The man hesitated again, but this time, Mia didn't wait. She grabbed him by the collar, lifting him off the ground. Tell me now. He's in the city, the man said quickly. But you won't get to him. He's too powerful, too dangerous. Mia's grip tightened. Where? She demanded. He's always a step ahead, the man replied, fear in his eyes. But there's a safe house. He'll be there. You can't miss it. Mia released him and nodded at Victor, who had been watching the whole exchange. We've got what we need, she said, her voice low. Let's go. They turned and headed back the way they came. But Victor could feel the weight of what they had just learned. Decker was the key, and now they had to face him. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for justice, and they weren't going to stop until it was over. In this gripping narrative, you will experience some of the most touching stories filled with suspense, betrayal, and survival. As the main characters fight their way through a dangerous world controlled by powerful forces, they discover the meaning of true strength and trust. From hidden motives to secrets that change everything, these touching stories will captivate your heart and keep you on the edge of your seat. The journey to uncover the truth about the Syndicate becomes more than just a fight for survival. It is a fight for justice. Along the way, the characters confront their deepest fears and learn to rely on each other in ways they never imagined. The story is full of emotional twists and turns, making it one of the most touching stories you will ever read. As the stakes grow higher, the line between enemy and ally blurs, and the ultimate question remains. Can they survive the most dangerous of enemies? This tale is not just about escaping danger. It is about finding courage in the face of impossible odds. Touching stories like these remind us of the resilience of the human spirit and how even in the darkest times, hope can still prevail. Whether it's about personal growth, redemption, or standing up against overwhelming odds, these touching stories show how the smallest moments can lead to life-changing consequences. Get ready to experience a roller coaster of emotions with these touching stories that will stay with you long after you finish reading.